All right, welcome to this exciting and momentous occasion. I am Sujin Pak, Dean of the School of Theology at Boston University, and it is my great honor to bring you greetings on behalf of the School of Theology and in celebration of this launch of the China Historical Christian Database. The Center for Global Christianity and Mission has distinguished itself as a leader in many important endeavors, and among its many accolades is its leadership in digital humanities projects. This groundbreaking tool enables and expands research about modern relations between China and the West and Chinese Christian history, more specifically, as well as fostering a historical understanding between China and the globe. I am so grateful for Dr. Dana Roberts' leadership of the Center for Global Christianity and Mission. And I want especially to thank Dr. Daryl Ireland for overseeing the CHCD project in partnership with Dr. Eugenio Minigan and Dr. Alex Mayfield, who are both here today. And they have been working with a team of around 30 researchers around the world. So thank you all for bringing us to this moment and providing this amazing tool.
Thank you very much to Dean Sujin Pak. My very pleasant job is really to thank our collaborators today, to mention their names, to let you know that this is not an enterprise that we engaged in single-handedly, but that it is really a great collaborative job amongst many. So first of all, let's start with the leadership of the School of Theology at Boston University. Before I do that, I am Eugenio Minigan. I am one of the co-investigators for the project, and I teach Chinese history in the history department at Boston University. And together with my co-conspirators, Professor Daryl Ireland, who is Associate Director of the Center for Global Christianity and Mission, and Professor Alex Mayfield, graduate of the School of Theology in History of Christianity, who is starting soon as Assistant Professor of History at Asbury University in Kentucky. I'm welcoming you all. First, let's thank the leadership of the School of Theology. Of course, Dean Sujin Pak, you just heard her welcoming words, as well as former Dean Mary Elizabeth Moore. Be aware that the center has been engaged in digital humanities project for over 20 years, but that at least for the last 3-4 years, we have received the support of the School of Theology also from the previous dean. I want to thank the Center for Global Christianity and Mission, Professor Dana Robert, the director of the center, who has been always with us, giving us all kinds of support, both moral, intellectual, and financial as we needed it. There is a number of CHCD project collaborators. I put the address of our website in the chat, and you can go there and see more details. The main collaborators are Professor Liu Xiang from the Institute of Qing History at Renmin University. I believe she's here today. Dr. Alexander Dimitrenko, a graduate of Chinese University of Hong Kong and a recent postdoc at Heidelberg and an independent scholar. Amanda Clark, librarian at Whitworth University in the state of Washington. Matthew Preston at Anderson University in Indiana. You already mentioned Alex Mayfield at Asbury University, Daryl Ireland at BU, and myself. I want to thank also the CHCD advisory board that has helped us in the initial phases of brainstorming about our project. Professor Peter Ball, Professor of East Asian Languages and Civilization at Harvard University, who is a leader in the field of Chinese digital humanities. Professor Zhu Bingyi, chairperson of the Department of History at the Institute of History and Philology of Academia Sinica in Taiwan. Professor Margarita Guillory in the Department of Religion at Boston University. Professor Hu Heng, who is Vice Director of the Institute of Qing History at Renmin University, Professor Ruth Mostern, Director of the World History Center at the University of Pittsburgh, and Professor Nicolas Stendert, Professor of Sinology at the Katholieke Universiteit Leuven in Belgium. Of course, it is important to have leaders, but it is important also to have really people who form the backbone of the project, who in our case are the 97 students who have been involved as research assistants with us in the past 5 years. They have worked in at least 9 different languages. They have put together a combined 7+ years of full-time data entry. And without them, we would have done very little. We want to thank those who have given financial support and also the intellectual prestige to our project. In particular, I wanted to mention the National Endowment for the Humanities and their digital grant that has allowed us to expand the scope of our project. And I think that NEH liaison Jennifer Sorventi might be with us today. So we want to really thank her and the NEH for what they're doing, and we hope they will do more in the future. We want to thank the Institute for the Cura Institute at Boston University. And so right now I want actually to put on the screen for you the names. You can find this page actually also on our website with the names of many of our collaborators. So this is our webpage where you can find all this information, and you have the address in our window. And now I want also to show you within our webpage, you have a list that is still growing of many partners that you see here, that I'm going to also thank shortly. So the Cura Institute and its director, Timothy Longman, they really came in with some financial support and some moral support when we really needed it in the past 2 years during the COVID crisis, as well as the BU Center for the Study of Asia and its former director, Tom Berger, and the new director, Bob Hefner, again, always very supportive of work in Asian studies at Boston University. Thanks once more to Peter Ball and his team at Harvard University for really practical advice when most needed, to Professor Christian Henriot and his team at in Provence for the advice they have given us over time. He is the leader of a project on Chinese elites that is really making great headway recently. All the participants and presenters at the November 2020 workshop that we organized, that have given us so much advice, tips, and really a capability of brainstorming that has really helped a lot our project. I want to name very quickly some of the institutions. You see all their names on the website. More will be added, and especially some of those that have been working more closely with us. We have Renmin University and several faculty there, the Ricci Institute at Boston College, before the University of San Francisco, the Ricci Institute in Taipei, Taiwan, the Monumenta Serica Institute, the Orientale University in Naples, the University of Perugia in Italy, Whitworth University, Anderson University, the Pontifical Institute for Foreign Missions, and many others that you find on the slide. We have to thank also dozens of private donors who have donated funds in different amounts when most needed, and really have made possible for our project to continue and to advance. And I would like to invite you actually to visit our website and to navigate to the donate button. Any amount that you donate to this project as individuals will be recognized and will go a long way to help with the project. So I think I must have missed certainly many others who have helped us, but I've tried to be comprehensive. Thanks to all of you who came today. Many of you who are listening today are actually our supporters. And I'm going to introduce now our next speaker, Alex, right? You're going next, correct?
That's right. Thank you.
Yes. So Alex Mayfield is assistant professor of history at Asbury University, and until recently has served as the project director for the CHCD. So a lot of what you see, especially the technical part, is really the fruit of the great labors of Alex. His research interests include global Pentecostal and charismatic movements, ecumenism, mission history in Asia, the development of Chinese Christianity in the modern period more in general. And of course, he has also worked in digital humanities. And he is going to introduce to us the more technical aspects of our database and give us a little bit of the history of our project. Alex, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here today. It's a monumental occasion to just celebrate what has been the fruits of so many people's labor. If you've just heard, this project would have been impossible without the many partners and hundreds and hundreds of hours dedicated to make this possible. But really, this large project really started with a small idea, and I'd like to talk about the history of the project and how something like this came to be. This really began in the classroom, I think, and that's important for some of the goals that have continued to stay with the project from the very beginning. This began at a course I was actually taking with Professor Minagan, in which we were exploring some digital humanities tool sets and projects, and I began to study Pentecostals in Hong Kong and tracking their movements and their relationships over time. And that eventually morphed into a dissertation. And from that dissertation, kind of taking a very similar approach to what this project eventually utilized, we were able to find some really interesting learnings from the role of education in Pentecostalism, the role of women organizational leadership, and even the suburban focus of Pentecostal Christians, and how it was often different than what a lot of the literature talks about when it talks about the urban phenomenon of Pentecostalism. And so these small learnings with a very small graph actually upturned a lot of conventions about what we think about Christianity in China, especially Pentecostalism in China. And so as I was talking about this with Dr. Ireland, he had the kind of large idea of, well, what would happen if we take this same approach and we just do it for all of China? What if we just try to quantify it all, put it on a map and actually track everything and get concrete data on where people were and who they knew? Now that sounds crazy, and to be honest, we reached out to a few people and they told us it was crazy, and it is a little bit crazy. But we decided, I think there are enough enticements here to make us take the leap. We looked around and we saw that there were a lot of technology, a lot of skill sets which are readily available, which we could utilize to make something like this and bring it to fruition. But we also looked around and we saw that there were a lot of really successful digital projects on China that so many people have been involved in, even people in this room right now, from the China Historical GIS project, the China Biographical Dictionary, database over at Harvard, Professor Ireland's work with the Chinese Christian Posters Project, several other projects more broadly with the Ritchie Roundtable Database, Naku Sky, which is another kind of source material on Chinese sources. And we just looked around and we realized there is so much activity taking place in this field. It seems like there's enough resources, enough people we can ask to guide us as we begin this journey. And so we jumped. We took the leap and we decided to let's try to find as many things as we can to record it. And thankfully there has been, again, the culmination of standing on the the shoulders of giants. There's been some masterful reference and archival work done by scholars and archivists around the world. Not just, the ones that many people know about, like the recently passed Tiedemann, or De Heron's work on the Jesuits, the work that's being done by the Taipei Ricci Institute on Jesuits. There are so many works and archival sources that have put these sources, which were once really inaccessible, which have made them more accessible. And through not just other database projects or scholarly reference works, but even through digitization. So more and more archives have made you don't have to go around the world to find these archives. You can actually just pull them up on your computer, or at least email someone and they'll get it to you. So we really, we are living in this new age, which makes a project like this possible in a way it never would have been before. And we were able to compile these resources and put them together in a flexible framework so that students and researchers around the world can access them. So, when we decided to do this and we took the leap, we realized there were some big challenges beyond just the scope of the project. There were a lot of big challenges just with trying to, the very specific kind of hurdles we need to overcome. In the study of Christianity, there's a lot of siloed resources from multiple language sets. As you mentioned, we had students working in 9 languages, but those archives about Christianity in China are located around the world, from China to Europe to the US. They are really everywhere. And so we needed to find a way to bring all of these together. And that was one of the big first challenges. The next one was that there's a lot of disconnected researchers. When we are doing research in different fields, whether it be Catholicism or Orthodoxy or Protestantism, or even small subsets of periods, a lot of us don't always know what's happening, or we're not always aware of what we're doing. And so we recognize that there's a need for partnerships and for bringing people together, because there is simply so much data to go through. We don't always know what we don't know. So we need to find the right people to talk to. But then lastly, taking on a large technical project like this, one of the biggest challenges is the misunderstandings of technology. Database projects and digital humanities are powerful tools, but we realized quickly that there's often so many of the fruits of that labor, which are sadly not enjoyed by many people, because they don't have the technical savvy to necessarily dive into the different UX designs, or to figure out where to find the right data, or how to pull it together to make something really pretty and understandable. And so we decided, this project, we want to make this a rigorous database with lots of information, but we also want to make it accessible to people, to get their taste buds going for digital humanities and begin to understand the power of these sort of large scale database projects. So those were the challenges, and our goals were simple, to try to address them as we made this database. So we unified the resources through the creation of a geographic and relational database, which spans 400 years and spans all the major Christian traditions, from Orthodoxy to Protestantism and Catholicism. We also partnered, as you just heard, with so many people around the world, which we would not have been able to do complete this project without, from Renmin University to L'Oriental and Perugia and Anderson, Ricci. I could keep doing this forever and forever because so many people, and not just professors, but students, independent students who reached out and wanted to be part of this project from wherever they were, have made this possible. And it really has created a rich global community which has brought this database into fruition. And then lastly, our major goal was creating an intuitive interface and technology so that we could increase digital literacy and allow this project to have a greater impact, so that people could truly understand and visualize the history of Christianity in China, a history that is sadly often hidden to many people around the world. So these are our goals. And I'd like to pass the torch over to Darrow Ireland, who will now then kind of talk us through of where we are and what the product that we've created is, so you can all begin to understand how we began to, what our solution was to these problems and challenges.
So let me introduce very briefly Dr. Darrow Ireland, who is the Associate Director of the Center for Global Christianity and Mission at Boston University, and the project manager for the Chinese Christian Propaganda Posters project. I put actually the link in the chat so you can go and have a look as well. His research focuses on the history of Christianity and mission in Asia, and he has studied John Sung, a Chinese revivalist. He published a book on him, whose itinerant ministry renewed the spiritual life of tens of thousands in the 1930s. And he has written more broadly about revitalization movements, the role of women in revivalism and religious conversion in China and Southeast Asia. Darrell, go ahead.
Thank you so much. And thank you as well, Alex, for setting the background to what we're doing. And finally, this is an opportunity for many of you to see what you've heard us talk about in various fora over the last several years. Today, we actually get to walk you through the China Historical Christian Databases web interface. So just to be clear, if you come to our, if you hit the data button, you'll come to this page where you will see, you can learn more about the project, which in basic outline is simply this. We've set out to map where every Christian church, school, hospital, publishing house, orphanage, convent, et cetera, were located in China between 1550 and 1950, and to document who worked inside those institutions, both foreigners and Chinese people. And so combined, it allows us to create powerful spatial maps and social networks that can help us detect larger patterns in Chinese Christianity and its Sino-Western relations. So you can learn more about the project. You can read about documentation, exactly what we've recorded and how we've done this. This is a critical resource that I'll come to at the end of my talk today. And then you can also download the data. Just to be clear, what I'm about to show you is our web interface. We have created certain ways for you to interact with the data, but if you find it insufficient, if you have questions that aren't being answered by this web interface, you can download the data and sort through it yourself and find the answers to what you're looking for. But finally, I'm excited to actually show you what you can begin to do with the web interface. So you have a search button, which allows you to interact with the data through just an open-ended search. You can type in whatever you want. There's a map function. You can begin to look for ways to put people and institutions on maps. Networks, if you're interested in social networks, you can dive straight into this. And of course, language capability. It starts on my browser in English, but you can switch over to simplified or traditional Chinese. And then this last one is on every page. If you ever want to cite this resource, you can do it. Here it is in Chinese. If I go back to English, you can cite this in English as well. So let's start. And since I talked about this being a database where we set out to mark down where are these institutions, where's the churches, the schools, the hospitals, let's take a look at what that looks like. So if you hit the map function, we can map people, institutions, or events. Let's go ahead and do institutions. And let's leave it wide open. Let's not put any barriers on years just yet. Instead, let's go down to what do we want? Ecclesial, educational, medical, for instance. Let's go with medical, and it pops up with hospital, though there are other options here available if you wanted to be more specific. And let's find out where Christian hospitals were located in China. Now, this is going to be the longest search I think you'll see today, because it is over a 400-year period and it is sorting through close to 2 million data points. But here you go. We have a result of where hospitals, Christian hospitals, were located in China. You could take time to do the math and just add them up and know how many were there. But also I want to point to this top right corner. You can change your map. So we could create a heat map if you're interested in just trying to figure out where's the density of hospitals in China. You can also make this a topographic map. If you were interested in were hospitals gathering along waterways, did they congregate in flat plains, or were they more likely to be found in mountains? You can, of course, work in something like this. But of course, this is not to say that all these hospitals, there are 94 hospitals here in the east coast of China. As you move in, this will begin to break out to more and more specific areas. And as we close in on Beijing, you can see there's a number clustered right there. right here, sort of in the center, I see one, and if I click on it, it says Peking Union Medical College and Hospital, and I can learn more. I think I would like to learn more about this. I've heard of it. So you come here, we have some limited information at the top. We have the name, but we don't have the Chinese name at this point. But what we do have is a pretty lengthy list of people who were connected to the institution and the years they were there. And so you can scroll through and see who was working at the Peking Union Medical School. And as you go through and see these last years in 1950, I'm interested by the fact that there's this woman here. I'd like to learn more about Anne Cochran. So if I do and scroll up to the top of the page, I see that we have her Chinese name, that of course she's a woman, which doesn't surprise me with her name, but from the United States. And then where else she was connected. I can see down here that she was at the Peking Union Medical College, but she was also at the Huaiyuan Mission, the Haidian Mission, the Hill Murray Institute for the Blind, the North China Union Language School, and Central China Teachers College. And at the very bottom of the page, you'll see she was part of the American Presbyterian North. All of which is interesting to me, but if I'm interested maybe in her social network, I can come to the top and I could either map the various places Anne Cochran was located, or I can put her into a social network relationship. So if I choose that, this is what quickly pops up. And it seems rather small because the way we have entered this is Anne currently only has direct relationships with things like the North China Union Language School, the Peking Union Medical College and Hospital. But if I extend that out to 2, then we'll find out who were at those institutions the same time Anne Cochran was at those institutions. And when I do that, I get a much more elaborate picture of Anne Cochran and the life she had in China. She's nicely highlighted here in black. And you'll see the various organizations, the hospital, the Teachers College, the Institute for the Blind. These are larger because more people are connected to them. At this point, she's the only one connected to, let me zoom in, the Haidian Mission. So a rather small set of relationships. So that's size-wise smaller. If you ever have any questions, down here in the bottom right-hand corner, there's a key button, and you can pull this up to understand that all the blue dots represent men, the red dots are women, the orange is institutions. So there's tools to help you sort of understand what you're working with. But what I find particularly interesting about this is when you click on, if you just hover over the Teachers College, you see all the people quickly highlighted that were connected to it. If I come up here to the School for the Blind, also everyone highlights. And if you notice, this group of people between the 2 institutions were actually at both. So I'm guessing Anne Cochran had a very close relationship, particularly perhaps with these people that she both worked at 2 institutions. If I wanted to learn more about any one of them, I can click on it. And we now get information on Emma Conant's, the relatively little besides her Chinese name, and the year she was at the institutions that we have her located at. So there are various ways that you could do this. You could close down this window with this X and then move from person to person and really begin to understand the social world in which Anne Cochran navigated. But perhaps what you're more interested in at this point is getting a little more specific about hospitals. So we can do that, we can narrow down, and maybe you're researching particularly the ABCFM hospitals. The nice thing about our website is all the various names that an organization was listed by are linked together. So if you put in just the acronym ABCFM, it will still come up, American Board of Commissioners of Foreign Missions. So you can choose that. And again, we'll choose medical. Let's see where their hospitals were located. When I hit submit, we now have a picture of ABCFM medical institutions. And you could do further study on each one of those simply by clicking on them. It's all available. But if you looked at these medical institution categories, first let me clear all here. Maybe you noticed that there was the scientific category, and that gets you thinking about the Jesuits, who of course were famous for their work as scientists in China. If you type in Jesuits, again, Society of Jesus is there to remind you that that's the official title. And if you type in institutional category and we do scientific, and research pops up, I'm content with that. We find out currently we have 2 located, and let's find out what they are. One is the Qing Bureau of Astronomy, and the other the Qing Bureau of Mathematics. And if we learn more, we can go inside and find out who was there and when. So this is a fantastic resource to begin understanding who was gathered at which place and at what times. Now, as I look at this, if I were working through this and playing on the website, as I did when I thought about this presentation today, it made me think, well, you know, these people working in the Qing court, who else was maybe perhaps connected to the emperor? And I think of someone like, oh, I have to put my cursor here, Pravana was a Jesuit that I remember seems to have some record, and indeed quickly pulls up Antonio Francesco Giuseppe Pravana. And right underneath it, let me just point out all his alternate names that we have found him recorded as. So if you typed in these other names that sometimes he's been remembered by, you will also find him. And indeed, here's this emperor, this connection to the emperor. Pravana was an ambassador to Rome, sent by the Kangxi emperor. So this is the right one. This is the person I wanted to learn more about. You can click on that, you get more information about it. His Chinese name, of course, that he's Italian, birth date, death date, where he died. And then we have, in this case, a nice short biography pulled from De Hern to give you a little bit more information about his life. You go down, as in with Anne Cochran, we can also see where he was connected. And if you want to look at one of these, you can click on it and learn more. The Shanxi mission, you could put this, as before, you could put this on a map. Where exactly was it? Who was connected in a social relationship to this place? But what I found interesting when I was playing on this is that when I looked at who else was there and I was going through the names, I saw this person, Francisco Xavier Rosario Ho. And I thought, that sounds like a Chinese name. I wonder if it is. And by clicking on it, I come up with more information. And indeed, he was born in China, in Macau. And I think this is nice to find out. And when I go down and I see his institutional relationships, I see there are actually many of them. And I decide it would just be easier to see all this on a map. I want to picture his career as a Jesuit. And what you see is that this was an extremely mobile Jesuit, moving from the northeast corner of China all the way down to the southeast corner and to the far west. And when you think about his dates, some roughly 1650 to 1750, what a remarkably mobile person this is, and gives you maybe a deeper insight to what Jesuit missions were like in China at the time. So your search function is a powerful tool. It's also designed to help you out. So for instance, when I was thinking of our Russian Orthodox, I thought, maybe someone was named Igor, but current Romanization actually prefers Igor with an E here. And underneath it, if I knew Cyrillic, I could definitely check and see, is this the right person I'm looking for? We have that information listed there. But I also want to point out that the search engine also tries to help you anticipate maybe other names that you might have been going for when you typed in Igor. S.E. Ego, perhaps. You have Ivar Samuelson, Ivor. So we give you close options as well, which I think is a useful tool. There's nothing more frustrating than trying to type someone in and just getting no results. Hopefully we will help get you closer. Now, the last tab that I want to show you is the network tab. We've talked about searching for persons here, institutions, corporate entities, which are like denominations or religious orders, and events. So if we type in an event, we were just talking about Russian Orthodox. I might think, I seem to remember that the Russians, maybe they sent a mission to Beijing, and I see, these ecclesial missions, oh yeah, they sent a lot of missions. So I click on one, and and I want to see who was connected to this ecclesial mission from 1840 to 1850. And if this pops up quickly, I can zoom in and I can see their names, and I can either walk myself through each one of these or just click the mission itself and I get more information about it, including all the people who went on that mission trip. Now, if you were to click on these, as I've done on my own, you get some information about each of these people, but it's relatively little. Chinese names, but not really a biography. But if you were to say copy and paste I Zakharov and put it into a web browser search engine, maybe Google or Baidu, and add the word China next to this, you will quickly find out that Zakharov helped define the borders between Russia and China in the 1860s. And he later became a professor of the Manchu language in St. Petersburg Imperial University. Underneath him, Goshkovich became Russia's first ambassador to Japan. You have someone like Yuri Karpov, who was the first Orthodox Christian to translate the New Testament into Chinese. So you can use this list of names to do further research and points to help you along. But that maybe also helps hint at some of the limitations. In those cases, we don't have biographies about these people on the Russian mission. You need to do that on your own. And that's in part because this database is a spatial and relational database. It is not a biographical database. And so if you're looking for a biography of people, you may need to do some work on your own, though hopefully through this tool, you will know who to do research on. But then when you do use this tool, you just need to use it wisely. And so that's where like this documentation becomes very important. You want to know what data we've collected so that you can query it appropriately. So if you came here, for instance, you can see all the kind of data that we gather on people. And you can do the same for all the kind of data that we gather on institutions. And then this is helpful because if you look at this, you'll quickly realize that there are some things that you would be able to do with our data and some things you won't. So for instance, we do record when someone arrived in China and when someone left. So you could do a comparison of men to women. How long did men stay in China versus how long did women stay in China? Now, you can't do that with our web interface because we didn't design it to do that, but you could download the data and query it for that kind of information. On the other hand, what we don't record are when people are, when Protestant pastors were ordained. And so if you wanted to do a study to use our database to say, what was the average age of Chinese ministers when they were ordained, our database would not be useful. And so for you to always be aware that you can find out what we're recording so you can use this resource appropriately and get the best information out of it. And the other thing that I really urge you to do is always to use it smartly, to be aware of the sources that we're using. This will tell you where all our data comes from. If you look closely, I forgot to point it out when I was giving you the tour, but with each person and each institution we looked at, it says source, and then it will give you something like AGB3, and it tells you that that would be A.G. Broomhall, Hudson Taylor, and China's Open Century, book 5. And we would give you the page number as well there on the database, so you would know where our data came from. But by going through this source list, you can begin to see what we have already added to the database and where some of our holes are located. And that's really important. I am afraid that if you, for instance, did a search right now for Franciscans, you would think that only a few made it to China, and the few who went to China all became bishops or some other ecclesiastical official. But that's not true. We're still working through the Latin necrologium of the Friars Minor in China. And until that source is added to this page, we only have a few Franciscans in our database on our web interface right now. And that's because we only got Franciscans from the Catholic hierarchy. resource that's listed here in our source. So you would only find ecclesiastical officials. You won't find the more than 1,000 other brothers and fathers who were with the Franciscan order. So always just be aware of your sources. But even with those limits, I just want to emphasize that we believe that this source now, this database now has enough information for you to begin using it in new, powerful, and exciting ways. We see it has potential. There's enough data in there to do long-term analyses over distance. It allows you to do comparisons between Catholics, Protestants, and Orthodox, something that's never really been done before. There is enough there to get started in new ways. And the good news is that the database will only continue to grow and become stronger. The data we have today will not be the same data available, hopefully at this time next year. We have already begun working on the China Historical Christian Database 2.0. This summer, we have been, for instance, we've added Catholic and Protestant schools that have yet to be uploaded. Publishing houses, all the publishing houses in China, the Lazarists as a Catholic order, as I mentioned, the Franciscans are going in. We also are adding new things, new data on Chinese Protestant leaders, pastors, and doctors. And we're hoping to have a more optimized Chinese language search engine. Because I will tell you that if you go to that search tab and search in Chinese with Chinese characters, we're having erratic success, and we want that to be strong success. So we're making strides, and they're strides that we believe will provide better information and more granular information that will only allow your research to grow stronger with time. And so at this point, I am going to conclude my walk through the database, and I am going to invite questions and questions from you all. We will try to provide answers, but also I would really urge you to consider sharing with us visions. How do you imagine using the China Historical Christian Database? Because that allows us, as we think to version 2.0, 3.0, how to perhaps best tailor our work to give you the kind of resources you need to use this new tool to its best. So thank you so much for coming, for enjoying this. We have put in the chat several times the actual link to the website and to the database, so you can begin exploring it yourself. But we now welcome your feedback.
I wanted to just add very quickly to what Daryl mentioned. Here is a page from our newsletter that you also find on our website from February that was announcing the kind of data that you would find in this version 1.0. Alex might add if there are sources that are not included here, but fundamentally, this is most of the data that is in the database at the moment. And as Daryl mentioned, this is an work in progress, is 1.0, and then we will be moving on to new versions as when the new data is inserted.
And just to encourage anyone, you can feel free to throw a question or comment in the chat. We can respond to it there, or just also you can unmute and turn your camera on if you'd like to ask a question or share an idea.
So Liu Xian has asked a question. Does every user need to register or sign in to use the database? Alex, do you want to answer that?
Sure. No, the database is free and open and available to all. So all you need to do is to put the web address into your browser, and it will come up and you can use it. So yeah, this is totally free to use. So please do share it with your students, use it in your research. And again, feel free to download the data. It again is all open source. So download the data if you need to and utilize it for whatever means you need. This is open and available to all.
And Easton Law, I see you have a hand up.
Yes, thank you so much. This is just mind-blowingly awesome. That's all I initially have to say. But when we think about you continuing to work on this from 1.0 to 2.0 and 3.0 and the implications, I work on more contemporary issues. Of course, everything that's contemporary is tied to history. There's no way that you can divorce those two. And so what would be really fascinating for me looking into the future, this is probably a 3.0, 4.0 thing, but to be frank, and I'm sure you guys have imagined this, is how do these networks perhaps, shrink down within the People's Republic era, but how do they expand back out into maybe not contemporary, but say the 90s? That's going to take a whole other set of research, but that's tied to something I think is more reasonable for maybe a 2.0, is simply with the major institutions or the major figures to start creating, taking annotated bibliographies about just research out there that is about that institution, and then that pops up with it for the bigger institutions and persons. So those are two things that I thought would one super in the future, but one I think more practical for now. Is what I've been thinking. Fantastic. Thanks for that feedback, Lisa. This is helpful for us to hear how users like you imagine interacting with a data set like this. I'm going to call on Professor Feng-Gang Yang in just a second, but a lot of things are coming in the chat. Forgive me if I'm missing some of the questions, but I noticed, for instance, someone has just made the comment that names of Catholic sisters are still missing. And so there's real limitations there. That's correct. We have a small group of Maryknoll sisters as well as Passionist sisters listed, but there are large swaths of sisters still missing. So one of the recommendations that I would make early on for all of you is if you do want to do a particular search of a kind of group, or especially where you're thinking you're going to be making some conclusive, where you're going to draw final conclusions, make sure you check with us and ask, is this data set reasonably complete? Can I put confidence in that? Instead of just running it on your own and assuming it's complete. We are available for those kind of questions. Okay, yeah. Oh, go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, I will say that. And there's a few questions in the chat about entering more historical data. So we are currently, like as Daryl mentioned, collecting a lot of data, but there's still other data points that we maybe aren't specialists in or don't have access to, which you all might be. So if you would like to participate and join in the project, the data collection side, do reach out to us and we can help you organize. Some of the easiest ways to do this are tools that you might already have at your disposal, from using Excel sheets to collect data in a way that we can then utilize and put into the database. So this has been a collaborative effort from the very beginning. And so if you say, oh, I want these people to be known or seen, I know they're there, and you want to do that work and partner with us, just reach out. This has been a project birthed in partnership and run on partnership. So we'd be happy to partner with all of you there. So yeah.
Great. Professor Feng-Gang Yang, we need to also say thank you to, he actually gave the three of us our first opportunity to talk about the concept of this database. And it was at a workshop that he sponsored that had us rethink fundamentally our database. We actually abandoned our original database and created a graph database because of our time in Purdue. So it's great to see you again. And you have a question or a comment for us?
Yeah, well, first a comment. This is marvelous. Thank you for the great work. Seeing this in fruition is great. I do have some questions. One, I haven't looked at the website, so I should have checked, but I was waiting for this occasion to hear first. About the people you include, what are the people? How did you include? How did you decide to include or exclude people? Are these only missionaries? Do you include Chinese Christian leaders, and also not people but institutions or the corporate organizations like Chinese denominations? Do you have churches by 1950 listed? So maybe three, yeah, all about the criteria you set to include and exclude what you have. For example, also the book, The Christian Occupation of China in 1922. Do you have everything in that book digitized and included? Thank you.
Great. You want me to? I can take that, Daryl, if you'd like.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great question, because how do you choose what to put in when the data set is potentially so large? What we settled on from the beginning was taking a what we call a corpus-based approach, trying to find documents, reference works, or lists or directories, things that would allow a sort of general similar approach to how the data was collected, to try to at least control for biases, or at least so if you're using the data, you know what you're looking at. So a good portion of the data as it stands now is coming from things like the Herrn's repertoire, from some of the amazing work done by Taipei Ricci. This is for the Jesuits. If you're looking at Protestants, you're looking at data that's coming from the Directory of Protestant Missions, which ran from the late 1800s to 1950. And so these were not holistic. They didn't capture everyone. They had their blind spots, but they generally were working in the same way as sources go. So you have a good comparison if you're looking at Protestants. Now that does mean we're getting a lot of missionaries versus Chinese people, which is unfortunate. But thankfully, we've been working with a lot in the past few months with Chinese students and working through some more Chinese resources and directories which have been compiled in biographies of prominent Chinese pastors. So hopefully very soon in the future, we're going to be having a lot more Chinese sources being featured in the site and Chinese leaders. So yes, right now it is a little bit tilted towards foreigners, but we're hoping to correct that very soon. And there is still a very sizable number of Chinese Christians in the database. So a lot of the prominent ones you probably will catch still.
I've seen several questions from people who are asking, if they have material that could contribute to this, how to get involved. What would be involved? What would be required? How would they do that?
Yeah, if you have materials that you'd like to be involved, again, I think the best way is to reach out. You can via email. You can find that information, I think, on our website. And if you just send us an email and tell us, hey, there's this resource I know of, and we can talk you through how we might be able to enter that. Because of our corpus approach, we liked it to make sure we vet and understand these sources before we put them in, so that we don't have sort of disproportionate data pockets that make it really hard to analyze what this database is actually saying. If you have thousands of data points on a tiny little village and only a few data points on a massive city, it can have a strange effect on people's analysis. And so it's, again, keeping that idea of pedagogy and digital literacy at the forefront. We could do that. We could put everything in, but we do have this tension of trying to make sure that at the very least what people are looking at gives them a decent picture, because we want people to understand this story and utilize this tool in a responsible manner. And that can be hard because digital literacy takes a lot of work. I think we have a question from Dong Wang.
You're right.
Or comment.
Hello, greetings from Northwest Germany. It's so nice to see all the familiar names and faces. Thank you so much. First of all, congratulations on all the achievements. Really, I think you all should be very proud of this project. Now, I have some specific questions or some comments. I think already some colleagues have mentioned it. I think it's a colleague, Island, Herb Island. I think, have you considered for the database version 2.0 or 3.0 and more in the future, would you be considering maybe include like Tibet, Xinjiang, Mongolia? And I know, of course, in the 1922, the Christian occupation of China, they have included some of these regions and areas. But anyway, so that's just a quick question. And then the second question is, since, our field has been moving so fast, particularly, I think now one of the research front is the Chinese diaspora. Have you considered maybe including the Christianity in Chinese diaspora, for example, in Southeast Asia, in the Oceania area? I speak of this out of my own interest also, because I'm currently writing a book, short book on maybe the first native medium man, Xue Santai. And he was a devout Australian Cantonese Christian, and of course later joined in the British civil service, and also became at least a founding father of the Republic of China. So controversially, maybe we can argue about it. But anyway, so that's the second comment or question. Now, the third question is, it's fascinating. I'm just thinking if you all have ever considered crossing the 1950 line. So that would be really fascinating to know. Then let me see. Yeah, the other one is Taiwan, Hong Kong. Have you considered including sources from those places which are definitely relevant and rich? Yeah, so basically it's the Cantonese Pacific, for example, might be a very good, kind of new perspective or old perspective, to consider, to take into consideration, particularly for example, also the Indo-Pacific. Anyway, so congratulations again. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you. Professor Minigon, maybe you can answer some of those questions about the geography decisions and the timeline decision.
So first of all, we decided to cover from 1550 to 1950 for reasons that are to an extent political. We wanted to stop with the beginning of the foundation of the People's Republic of China, because the kind of materials that are available up to 1950 is much richer. It's present in archives all over the world. After 1950, things get much more difficult to document. And Professor Yang Fenggang here has the experience with his own projects of trying to document the present. And so the question that was asked before about moving into the PRC period, that's quite complicated. And as always, when you involve people who are alive and kicking and institutions that exist today, things get more complicated. So that's certainly for the chronology. In terms of geography, we had to start from somewhere, and that somewhere is already enormous. It's China. And so we decided that we would concentrate on China. What Professor Dongwan mentioned, that is areas like Xinjiang, or someone else asked about Tibet, Taiwan, and Hong Kong are included. So the borders of late imperial and modern China are what we are after right now. Obviously, when we are studying a global religion like Christianity and missionaries in China, we're talking about a global phenomenon. So it would be ideal one day to be able to connect the dots with the places where the missionaries came from, places in Southeast Asia, overseas Chinese communities, and we have gotten requests in this sense. We had some preliminary conversations, for example, on doing a similar project for Korea and for Japan, but we can't do everything at once. We still have so much to do for China. So this is sort of experiment also, and hopefully an inspiration for those of you who are listening today and who might be interested in helping, that similar projects and our own technological template can be used for other parts of the world to move the map, to enlarge the map to the entire world. So if you are interested in Korea, Japan, the Philippines, Southeast Asia, you are welcome to get in touch with us. Our infrastructure is open source. We're willing to share our know-how. Professor Mayfield in particular has been the architect of all of this, but also in the future, there will be successors to him. 1.0, and as I wrote also in our chat, we want to do 2.0, 3.0, but we need your support. So your intellectual support, your labor, but also donations. If you can't do anything else, send us something through the donate button at the top of our web page on the right side. Any amount is great, and we will be grateful for that.
Well, we've reached 10 o'clock. I'm going to just pick up two quick questions because I think they might help answer other things that have been circulating. One was that someone has played with it and noticed that we don't display the relationship types in the social network, whether someone is a spouse of, or a child of, or a coworker of, or exactly what the relationship type is. And that's true. That was a design choice, but it is in the database itself. So again, you can download, remember the web interface is not the database. You can download that in CSV files and spreadsheet files, and you can look at those kind of more detailed specific information that you're looking for. Now, there was one other question that surfaced that I think some of you will quickly run into as well. And then as you're looking at it, you will find errors, mistakes, or incomplete data. And if someone wants to let us know, how can they best do that? Professor Mayfield, maybe you have a thought or a comment on that.
Yeah, I think we probably need to develop an infrastructure based on responses of what the best way to do that was. For now, I think, again, emails are going to be the best, just because there's probably not a million experts out there who know exactly where someone was and have that sort of detailed knowledge. So again, reaching out, I think in the future, we will probably develop perhaps some forms or things like that, where you could just kind of more streamline, kind of submit an issue with change. Now, some of these, it's important to remember, as a historical site, we have tried our best to ascertain and fix things when we find them, but we've also privileged historical sources, which sometimes are not accurate, as we all know. So you might have two sources which say different things, and so that could also lead to some of the issues that you might see. So again, I think databases and online digital projects can give you this veneer of veracity and truth at all times. But any good historian should know that these are all historical subjects. These are all contingent, and we need to kind of use the same historical lenses when we come to a project like this. At the same time, it is an amazing tool for research, and that's what it's intended for, to help you dive deeper into the sources and produce new and exciting scholarship.
Excellent.
I want to add just one piggyback on what Dr. Mayfield said just now. Cleaning the data takes a lot of time. And even the data that is now available through our database might still need some cleaning, because we might realize that there are mistakes. For example, Chinese characters need still to be entered for many institutions and so on. So it is also at that level, and might be easier actually than working on completely new data that we do not know, that you can contribute. You can say, I looked at this set of missionaries or this set of entries of institutions, and I have more data that you could enter, and these are the sources, this is the data that we can contribute. So I would say, even playing with what is now there, sometimes it might be still incomplete and will need much more work. In particular, we have a shallow coverage of many Protestants, men and women. But as you notice, once you use the data set, you will have less biographical data that you would have for, let's say, the Jesuits or some other Catholic religious orders, simply because the sources we have been using are different. There are sources for the Protestant missionaries that are not as rich biographically in the way we have, we found them as lists, whereas there are many more published inventories and published biographical repertories of religious orders of the Catholic tradition. And so that's simply a function of the sources we've been using so far. It doesn't mean that this is frozen and it is like this forever. We want to continue adding and find appropriate sources to do so, but this will take time. We can't do everything at once.
Great. I appreciate all of you taking this time. I see from our comments that we could still go on, but I want to respect the fact that you have busy lives, that you gave an hour to this is a joy to us. We're grateful. We're grateful to so many of you. You've been conversation partners through this. You've been cheerleaders, friends. You've input in many ways, various things that have created what we've been able to share. I'm grateful for that. At the end, I have just added my email address. You've heard from me about this conference. Hopefully you have it available. If you would like to follow up with a question that didn't get answered, or you have something that we need to address, please go ahead and address me at this moment. I see the note that says maybe it's wise to create a separate email account for that, and that's probably a good idea in the future, but this is what we have set up today. So feel free to reach out to me. But thank you so much for your time and for your encouragement. And we look forward to seeing how this resource will begin to help shape all of our work in the field of Chinese history and Chinese Christianity. Thank you so much and have a wonderful day or night, depending where you're at in the world.
Bye.
Bye-bye.